Namaste. And today my job is a little easier. Lunch has not yet been served, but just one cookie and chai or coffee, so that's good. Okay, so now the stage has been really nicely set by both Anuradha ji and Mohit ji. Some of the fundamentals about Vedic symbolism, Vedic deities, the imagery of battle, the imagery of journey and pilgrimage, all these three things fused together has been introduced. So now I want to take us to a little bit of, the more practical aspects, the applied aspects of that. So yes, if the Veda speaks of life as a battle, we need to be a warrior in this battle. And what role education can play in making us into hero warriors, the warriors who will fight this battle. So I want to start with sort of a contemplation on, or a reflection on a prayer that Mother gave to the students. I have the ability to do it. I was thinking, in 1952, to the students at Sri Aurobindo International Center for the Education, popularly known as Ashram School, this is the prayer. She said, each student in the Ashram School and the higher course knowledge should be starting with their day with. But in the larger scheme of things, we are all learners, we are all students, children of the Mother. So this is not a prayer that is confined only to the students in an institution, to all of us. So I want us to just take a minute as I read this prayer, because to me this is a very Vedic prayer at its heart. So what does she want us to aspire to? Make of us the hero warriors we aspire to be. Make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the great battle of the future against the past that seeks to endure, so that the new things may manifest. Make of us the hero warriors we aspire to become. May we fight successfully the great battle of the future against the past that seeks to endure. There is something about the past which won't let us move forward, and our battle is against that past. So we are here speaking of celebrating this great heritage that we have of the Vedic knowledge, the Vedic truths, the Vedic wisdom. But Sri Aurobindo always says we have to walk towards the noons of the future. So how do we take this Vedic knowledge, this Vedic wisdom, so that we are ready to fight the fights of the future? Because there is a new future waiting to manifest, and we have to walk towards with that with an Aryan spirit, with the spirit of a hero warrior. So hero warrior is an English phrase to bring back the same Aryan character that Anuradha also mentioned in her talk this morning. So this is really, if we think about this prayer, this is really a reimagining or a very radical thinking of what education's purpose should be about. It is not about us becoming great engineers and scientists and artists and educational thinkers and scholars. All of that will come on its own, but it is something about transforming us or facilitating our becoming into a power-packed hero warrior who can boldly walk into the future against the past. Now, this is not just about transforming the world, that there are wars going on and we want a world peace and all that. This is about the past in me that seeks to endure. My old habits, my vasanas, my vikaras, my inabilities, my limitations, which keep me comfortably in my comfort zone. Against that, I have to fight so that new in me can manifest. And once, as I think Anuradha mentioned yesterday, or somebody mentioned, if it can be done in one person, it opens up the possibility for everyone. So in so many ways, in so little words, Mother is really giving us a Vedic vision and to remind us that this should be our prayer daily. Not just prayer, but actually working towards that. So who is a hero warrior? I deliberately chose this image. Maybe some of you recognize Ahilya Bai Holkar. She was someone, most people would probably know a little bit about her. Last year we celebrated 300th birth anniversary of Queen Ahilya Bai, Devi Ahilya Bai Holkar. She's not spoken of as Queen or Maharani, she's spoken of as Devi by the people of Indore and Maheshwar. What made her into Devi? What made her into a hero warrior? She was a little girl when she got married. Her husband was killed in a war and she was so heartbroken, she was ready to sit in the funeral pyre with her husband. Who became her savior and who took her out and showed her a new path? Her father-in-law. He said, I am the one who's going to make you learn. She was a beautiful singer. She was a Shiva Bhakt. And that's what attracted her father-in-law before he was her father-in-law, that she would be a good wife for my son. And that's how they got married. And he says, no, your work is not here. He saw what was potential in her. He taught her how to ride a horse, how to, how to become a warrior, literally a fighter. She learned how to use swords, how to really fight the battles. Literally, and how to govern. She's well known for her governance. Her reign in Indore, Maheshwar was considered as of the golden age of that era. The new policies, taxation policies and civil works that she did. And another part that she's known for was that her footprints are there in almost every corner of India. All the temples that can be desecrated and destroyed by Aurangzeb and others like him, she tried to recreate them. Punarutthan, Somnath temple, Kashi Vishwanath, even up to Rameshwaram, her footprints are there. So she is a perfect example of the hero warrior that our education should facilitate us to become, because she had all of these characteristics. She stood for truth, justice, beauty, harmony. She works, a hero warrior is one. Oh, I didn't know I had put the name. I thought I was going to ask you to guess. I'm sorry, my plan failed. I didn't realize. I really thought you didn't read. Okay. This is a life-size statue, actually bigger than life-size, that they have in her palace in Maheshwar. And they're still doing the foundation in her name. They're still doing a lot of work, because another work that she did was she brought in several weavers into Maheshwar. The Maheshwari and Chanderi sari, which is so popular, it is her gift. They figured out a fabric that she could wear while riding a horse in that kind of weather and going in a sweaty battlefield. And so that fabric breathes like air. It's so beautiful. And they're still weaving saris in the colors that she preferred. Before she was widowed, after that she only wore white. But so, the Reva Foundation, in the palace itself, they're doing that. They have schools, they're doing a lot of environmental, ecological work and things like that. So a hero warrior, even after 300 years, her spirit is working towards all these things, working not only for personal advancement, but for collective good. Looking forward, battle of the future, not looking only at the past, looks forward, not backward, has the courage to confront and master their own lower nature. It was some impulse in her that said, my life would, after my husband's death, I'm still very young, my life would have no meaning, I might as well end it. This is not the truth of the Pativrata. Her truth of the Pativrata was to work towards the empire her husband was trying to build, right? That was truly her noble mission for which she was born. So she became that hero warrior by looking forward, by having the courage to confront and master that lower impulse. And she refused to be shaped by external forces alone. At the time where queens were not the flavor of the day, because there was so much infighting going on. And she was, by the way, as a regent queen. It was only after her son and son-in-law both passed away, technically she became queen. But even when her son was very young, she was the force behind all the work that was going on. So a hero warrior is one who shapes his or her destiny consciously. This is what the purpose of education should be, and that's what Mother's Prayer constantly reminds us that we should be aspiring to become. Now, why is it? It sounds also good, but we have some very practical reasons why this rethinking or reimagining or a radical, re-envisioning of education is needed. And Sri Aurobindo has given 2-3 very specific points. He's given a lot, but I'm just going to point out 2-3 things in terms of what is the context and need for what this reimagining has to be done. I've put 2 points there. One I have here in the notes. So, often we forget that the vision of integral education or the philosophy of integral education that Mother and Sri Aurobindo have given us, it started long time back when Sri Aurobindo himself was an educator, not far from here. When he was, as a teacher at Baroda College, when he was kind of experimenting with ways of teaching that were not the flavor of the day, going beyond the syllabus, not looking at what the standard textbook questions or answers or curriculum was about, but making students think, making students question, and giving them big picture so that they would become interested in what literature is all about, not just teaching literature as ki is poet ko padhna hai aur iska ye question answer hai, but to really give them, make them understand what literature means for personal growth, right? So the roots of integral education lie, as far as I've been able to understand, in his own experiments with teaching, though he has not written much about them in an autobiographical way. But his earlier writings on national education were literally derived from his own experience as an educator. And maybe also as a student, when he was going through this process of self-learning in Baroda in those 13 years, when he was teaching himself what it means to be a Bharatiya. He had immersed himself into every expression of the best of the Bharatiya culture, whether it was poetry, whether it was Mahabharata, Ramayana, Upanishads, as Mohit was talking about. He came to Veda a little later through his experience, but so many other things he was reading. Kalidas, he self-taught Sanskrit. He was a master in many languages. He learned his own native language, his mother tongue, Bengali, Marathi, you speak, you name it. So he was really self-immersed in becoming an Indian in the true sense of the word, right? So through that experiments, we get 2 major points into why this whole rethinking of education is needed in the light of Vedic insights. The first one I want to talk about is from an Arya issue, the last issue of Arya, 1921, where he talked about that there's so much discussion going on, and he's responding to some, criticism of why there should be a national education. So we often forget that his program of Indian independence movement, the 5-point program, one of the key points was national education, because it was not just political freedom, it was mind's freedom also that was important for him. And somehow there was a discussion going on that human mind is same everywhere. So why do we need some specific national education? So in that context, Sri Aurobindo responded in several of his writings. But in one of the writings, which I want to quote, is from the 1921, the very last issue of Arya, where he said that there is a strong need to first identify what is the national temperament and national spirit. But then he added another important phrase, that by identifying that, we are actually also able to identify what is the future need of humanity. And if we don't do that, we will be stuck with what he said, the present, false, empty, and mechanical education. I have not put everything in the slide. I have it here. These are his exact words. Because we are stuck, if we fail to do this, if we fail to identify what is the national spirit that demands of us what education should be like, we will be stuck with present, false, empty, and mechanical education. The goal has to be, now listen to this, the hero warrior comes. He says the goal has to be that we want an education that will help bring out, again his words, a real, living, and creative upbringing of the Indian manhood of the future. We live in times with phrases like toxic masculinity thrown around just without thinking. But manhood, there is a certain, if we develop the right sensitivity to what manhood is the true courage, the true strength with which we have to face life. It's not about a gendered view of the world, right? Because the word manas, I think it was discussed yesterday, manu or manas or man, all these come from the idea of having, this idea of being a mental being, right? It's connected with mind. It has nothing to do with the gender. But there has to be a strength also in the mind, right? So if we want a living, creative upbringing of the Indian manhood of the future, we need to have a rethink in the education. That is one point I want to bring out here as why do we need this radical rethinking of the education. And another one is from another writing of his. I don't have the date for it, but that's where we kind of, bring the Vedic insight into it. I've just put the summary there, but his full quote is actually even more telling. So I want to read out the full quote. This is what he said. Why do we need a radical rethinking of education? By itself, the logical or reasoning intellect, all these things we try to take care of in education. Logical and or reasoning intellect creates the accurate and careful scholar. Tick mark, done. The sober critic, the rationalist and cautious politician, the conservative scientist, that great mass of human intelligence which makes for slow and careful progress. This is typically what education, the best of education has been able to do to create these kinds of mentalities. What are these mentalities? Accurate and careful scholar. Get too many awards, become, a well-awarded scientist or a scholar. The sober critic. Criticism bhi kiya, but sober tarike se kiya, because all views are important. The rationalist and the cautious politician. I don't want to say anything, we all know that. The conservative scientist. Don't go and really think of apple gira hai to kuch ho sakta hai isse, That is someone who can think beyond the conservative scientist. All that is great mass of human intelligence which makes for slow and careful progress. All this we get if we keep emphasizing the logical and reasoning intellect, right? But what it fails to do is this. It does not create the hero and the originator. The inspired prophet. It does not create the mighty builder, the maker of nations. It does not conquer nature and destiny. It does not lay its hand on the future, command the world. No education can create a Ahilyabai Holkar if it only focuses on logical and reasoning intellect. A woman would travel all the way to, try to build Kashi temple or build, or rebuild Somnath temple when no other male king at that time would imagine that. It has to be some other faculty which would inspire her to do that, right? It would not make nation builders or the heroes or the originators. So naturally, we need an education which will take us beyond the logic and the reasoning intellect. The third point in which this context and need, I want to bring something from the mother, and I thought of it later, so it's not in the slide, which is a question that was asked of the mother. I have it here, sorry. So she was asked two questions. One, what illusions and delusions is our education today beset with? What are the illusions that our education system is stuck with? Her answer, very brief. Sri Aurobindo wrote long sentences. Mother said something very brief, so easier to read. She said, the almost exclusive importance given to success, career, and money. This is the biggest illusion education is beset with. The almost exclusive importance given to career, success, and money. The interviewer asked a second follow-up question. How could we possibly keep clear of them? Her response was again very simple, very precise. Insist on the paramount importance of the contact with the spirit and growth and manifestation of the truth in the being. Seek, make students, make learners become a seeker of the truth. Not truth anywhere outside, truth of the being. Growth and manifestation of truth of the being. Insist on that. Does our education help us do that? We all have to answer that question. Auro University gives us hope that this is the way education has to be in the future. But are there challenges? Sure. That is why this work is so important, right? So without working, we won't even be able to meet the challenges if we keep writing only papers on how education has to be done. It has to be done in matter. That's why the work that is being done at Auro is significant, because through the failings, through the challenges, new directions will be found, correct? So it has to be experimented like that. So this is why we need an education that will help us become the hero warrior, so that we can have this, an education which will help us, help the learners. But first thing I also want to add here, and not just the first thing, I've said many things. One other important thing I want to add, whenever I'm speaking of integral education, I'm not talking about students and teachers. I would rather use the word learners, but both students and teachers are learners in the game. Because integral education is first and foremost for the teachers. If the teachers are not living or modeling that integral approach to being, oneself, and to learn and to grow and get into the contact with the truth of the one's being, it cannot be brought into the classroom. So it's a co-creative kind of work. So how do we do that? The vision that we have from Mother Sri Aurobindo is this five-fold integral education. Everyone here connected with Auro knows about that, so I'm not going to spend time on it, but just want to emphasize that the bedrock is the psychic education. Because physical, vital, mental, many other, spiritual, we are not ready. So I will probably just stay on the first four, but without psychic, integral education cannot be called as integral education. It will be just another form of all-round holistic education. So psychic has to be the starting point. As we say of Bhagavad Gita, the surrender is the starting point and surrender is the end. In integral education also, psychic is the starting point. And it has to bring us to the awareness and emergence of the psychic. Then only it's truly an integral education. But before we talk a little bit more about psychic education, and I want to bring certain practical hints also, taking insights from Mother only. Some of the things that already Mohit talked about so beautifully, that, typically this, again, I think Mother speaks about this in the context of her writings on education. typically, education, we think of a curricula. What does a curricula look like? Curricula is about the past advancements that humanity has made. That, Mother says, is the first mistake how we think about education. It's not about teaching students what the past advancements have been. It's always about taking them to the next future. So far, Mother has said that we have, everything that has been part of human journey, human civilizational journey, has been to develop a very perfect mental being, the manu, the mind. And now the time has come where we have to think of what beyond the mental being. So now the time is to create a perfect supramental being. But it's a long journey, so we are at this transition. We are at this turning point in the history where, in her own words, just as nature has already created upon earth a mental being, man, so too there is now a concentrated activity in this mentality to bring forth a supramental consciousness and individuality. So this is another point, which is why we are here talking about these things. That this is a force in the nature that is taking sections of humanity to look for ways to bring out that new being, the new supramentalized individuality. So this has brought us, this turning point has brought us to this inner crisis, this evolutionary crisis of humanity. Yesterday also there were several people who asked questions about AI and all that. So no matter what kind of assignments, creative assignments we give up, and Anuradha and I, we were talking during lunch also, students have figured out to create the best possible papers through AI. So none of those old systems will work, right? We need to think of education in a totally different way. First thing that we have taken out from our educational endeavors is the sense of sacred. We have to bring back that sense of sacred. It's a sacred work that happens in the context of a classroom. It has to start from the teacher finding the sacred in the work. How do you start the day? How do you start a classroom period, right? How do you end a classroom period? Do you start with the silence, invoking the higher presence? Do you bring the deliberation in the classroom to a closure, which takes you back to the silence with which you started? So I work with a school where they have made it a part of every 50-minute period. 5 minutes of opening, they call it opening ceremony and closing ceremony, because it's probably more palatable for the parents, to have those terms, but it's a part of every experience, every classroom experience of every child, right? It's a very consciously put, they've created corners of sacredness, which can be anything. Maybe a student saw a stone somewhere and he or she felt drawn to it. It's a sacred object. Let me go and put it in my classroom in that sacred space, right? So find ways to bring the sacred back in the classroom rather than using classroom. I'm even talking of the physical space. Rather than thinking of it just as a utilitarian space, make it a vibrational space, right? Insist how curriculum will manage, it will, whether you can finish it or not, it's fine, but see how it's helping both the teacher and the student grow. Insist on conscious human growth through whatever subject that is being taught or discussed in the classroom. Focus on inner awareness, character formation. These things AI cannot do. Machines cannot do, right? All that part has to be emphasized more and more in the classrooms. And elevation and widening and deepening of the consciousness. This is actually what integral yoga practice is all about. Integral education is not cut off from integral yoga. In fact, Sri Aurobindo never used the phrase, as far as I understood, integral education. Mother has talked about it in her conversations with teachers and students, but it is integral yoga in the context of a teaching learning work environment. So heightening of the consciousness, deepening of the consciousness, and widening of the consciousness. Widening of the consciousness is actually really, really important in the context of integral education. And that's the first connection with the Vedic insight that we get here. If you remember yesterday, maybe in one of the presentations it was brought out, or Vladimir, I think, brought out the idea of Varuna. Varuna is the god of, the deity of vastness in the Veda. Invoke Varuna and facilitate this widening of the consciousness. Mother gives a beautiful example how to do that in a very practical way. So she says, if you're reading something as a teacher or you're working with a student, the student is stuck, you can't understand what the text is saying. I think yesterday Pankaj Saxena was talking about reading Sri Aurobindo, long sentences. So it's a good experiment. Read Sri Aurobindo to practice this widening of the consciousness to understand. So read a paragraph long sentence of Sri Aurobindo, your mind is stuck. Mother gives a practical tip there. She says, now what is happening is your mind is experiencing contraction. And I bring back what Anuradha was talking about in the morning. Your mind has contracted. You cannot make sense of what this sentence is saying. So what you need to do is practice relaxation in the body, right? That's where you can talk to Sushant ji and bring back the guided meditation experience, or having some sort of a pranayam, or having some sort of a breath regulation just for a few minutes. You relax, help the student relax, and that will bring the expansion. Read the sentence again. Mother says more of it will be clear to you. Do it another time. Keep doing it few times and you feel that expansion, which is nothing but the invocation of Varuna, and the meaning will be revealed to you. That has been many of our experiences, those who have enjoyed reading Sri Aurobindo's paragraph-long sentences, because it's a meditation for the mind. It's an ananda for the mind. You don't have to, if you're teaching, say, 5th grade or 7th grade or BA first year, maybe you don't have to start with long sentences of Sri Aurobindo, but a small poem. Because even his small poems are deeply mystic, and give them this experiment, give them this exercise to widen the consciousness. A very practical way, but in a way, practicing integral yoga. Right? So these are some of the things that machines cannot do. A teacher's presence is needed. One who is herself steeped into this practice of widening of the consciousness. Only she or he can bring that. So Mother was talking about that now we are at a turning point in the history where we need to, nature is working towards bringing out a supramental individuality, a supramental consciousness, a new being, and these are the 4 faculties that Mohit so beautifully talked about it, so I don't need to spend time on that. Drishti, Shruti, Ketu, that's another word Sri Aurobindo uses, Sarama for intuition, and Daksha, discernment. And Mohit was also talking about how in the mental realm, this is the supramental realm, in the mental realm they all translate into different things. So Drishti becomes, or revelation becomes observation, inspiration becomes imagination, intuition is more of an intellectual insight, intellectual perception, or an intelligent perception, and discernment is more of a reason-based judgment. That's the mental distortion or the mental reduction of these supramental faculties. Yesterday, Pankaj reminded us a few times that everything, in the context of art also, Sri Aurobindo reminds us, everything comes from the high up. So these supramental faculties, when they are translated into the mental realm, these 4 things become. I'll just take one example. Imagination, the inspiration, when it gets converted into the mental realm, imagination. Beautiful things can be created out of imagination. Some of the most perverse things can also be created out of imagination, right? That is why in the mental realm, they are always open to falsehood. There is always a problem that can happen, that they can take the learner, they can take all of us to a world of falsehood. That's why there has to be a constant aspiration, constant effort to go towards their more purified supramental versions. But I also just want to take the example of intuition here. The Sarma, the goddess Sarma that Sri Aurobindo also had an experience of. Growing up, I did not know about this because I grew up with Ramcharitmanas. But in Valmiki Ramayana, Vibhishan's wife has been given a name, and her name is Sarama. We generally think Ramcharitmanas tradition से आओ तो आपको ये याद है कि सीता जब अशोक वन में है, there is one of her attendants who is very good to her. Her name is Trijata, right? She is the daughter of Vibhishan. But if Trijata is so good, mother has to be even, at least equally good. So in Valmiki Ramayana, you have a name for Vibhishan's wife, and her name is Sarama. And when I put these things two together, Sarama is the deity of intuition, right? Sarama is the one, as Anuradha was describing in the morning, she's the one who first goes, she's the divine hound. She's the one who goes to find out where the light is hiding, where the cows are hiding. And Vibhishan is one. Think of it as a total juxtaposition of the Vedic legend into a story of Rakshasas and Asuras. Vibhishan is the one who is born into the family of Rakshasas, but he knows where the truth is, where the dharma is. So he changes over, he changes the side. If we look at it as a story, we celebrate Vibhishan. But maybe Valmiki wanted us to know this point, that he's guided by intuition. That is why his wife's name is Sarama. And because most of us don't know about it, or it's not talked about in the popular discourse, because intuition remains silent in the back, right? We can look at it in a patriarchal way, but that would be so boring. But this is the truth, that intuition stays in the back. She first does the work. She guides Vibhishan. Vibhishan means, from whatever little Sanskrit I know, the one who's quite terrible, right? But not terrible in the wrong sense of the word, but one who has the hero warrior-ness in him. But he's guided by intuition. He's the one who's telling Vibhishan, she's the one who's telling Vibhishan, go and change the side, because that's where truth lies, right? And when he goes, we know the story. Even before the battle, Ram makes him into a king, that he will be the next king of Lanka, because he knows what's the outcome going to be, correct? So through these stories, we can emphasize the value of how important it is to develop intuitive understanding. And Daksha, as we know, again, is a very important Vedic deity of discernment. Sri Aurobindo makes a very important note of caution. He says, because the mental versions of these faculties, observation, intellectual judgment, and whatever you have, imagination, they are all open to falsehood. So moving forward, as we go towards the next future, the ability of discernment, daksha, or vivek, he uses another word, vivek, that is going to be critical in developing, in our development as, hero warriors towards the next future. So that he emphasizes a lot on the ability, or the faculty of developing intellectual discernment, intuitive discernment, not the intellectual judgment. In today's world, we are so quick at judging. ये हो गया, ये इस कैटेगरी में है, इसको ये लेबल दे दो, ये इस गैंग में बिलोंग करता है, इस आइडियोलॉजी को बिलोंग करता है. पहले सिर्फ लेफ्ट राइट होता था, अब तो बहुत कुछ है, right? Yesterday in passing, Anuradha made a comment, but she said कि हम मिरर में देखते हैं, we can identify gender. Once upon a time, it was a statement made in passing, but it's a very telling statement. I don't know if you recall that, right? We are not even sure of our gender. That's what the world would like us believe. So there is more and more need to have that intuitive discernment of what is, not just what is right or wrong, but what is more right than the other right, right? Between two rights, which right should I choose? So again, there can be many stories, but I choose to just pick one story here. Most of you are familiar with this story of Amrit Manthan, Samudra Manthan, right? The Devas and Asuras are churning the ocean for the Amrit, the nectar of immortality, the bliss. Basically, that is what it is. That's the Vedic bliss, the Soma that they are trying to look for. And at one point in the story, Vishnu comes disguised as Mohini. Now they have to divide the Amrit, right? Both the Asuras want, which is the Dasyus of the Veda that Anuradha was talking about in the morning, and the Devas, the forces of light and the forces of darkness, which are forces within us. So when Vishnu comes disguised as this beautiful Mohini, the word itself tells, Mohini, one who attracts. What happens? The Asuras get attracted by her, right? They see her as this beautiful woman to chase, and their attention is diverted, right? So the Devas said, this is our chance to get the nectar, right? What did Asuras didn't have in these stories? They did not have that intuitive discernment that behind this beautiful form is Vishnu. They were just so captivated by the form. And this is where the connection with Pankaj Saksena's discussion yesterday, that the Western mind, forget the Western, the rational mind is so attracted by the form, it misses out on the spirit, right? The spirit was of Vishnu. The form was of Mohini, right? So the Asuras missed the game, and thankfully for us. That's intuitive discernment that we have to develop. And the best way to do that is the psychic education. That's the point that I wanted to bring, that what is the key to really making integral education and integral is if we emphasize psychic education. And Mother speaks of it as the great discovery, to find the truth of the being, the individual truth of the being, which is the divine spark in each one of us, unique to each one of us. The Angusht Matra, the thumbprint, which is unique to each one of us, has to be the fundamental goal of integral education, right? Because that's where, once we are in touch with that, it's the whisper of that true voice within which will tell us what is true and what is falsehood. Whether I align with the forces of light or the forces of night, right? What is this battle that I have to fight, and what do I need to this battle? Mother says psychic does not impose, psychic whispers. We can't listen to the whisper because all the other three parts are at that higher, noise level. The beautiful diagram that Anuradha was drawing yesterday in that thing, right? Too much jumbled up noises. So you have to bring back practices which will help silence the vital, quieten the mind, quieten the restlessness in the physical. All of that have to be emphasized in the classroom. So the physical, vital, mental education have to serve the needs of psychic education. What generally happens is we make everything look at holistic by physical, vital, mental, and forget what is the purpose for which we are doing it. So consciously know that this is development of the instruments so that psychic is constantly growing. But this great discovery can only happen when the teachers themselves, all of us, are ourselves on this path of great discovery. We can't tell students in the classroom, go find your psychic, and I'm sitting here without the will and the aspiration to do that. No, we have to be co-travelers with them in this battle. There is a battle journey to find that psychic, because all the other darknesses, forces will come in. So it requires unflinching aspiration, determination, will, perseverance. And I've put these words in capital for a reason, because these are all qualities connected with Agni, the mystic fire that since this morning we've been discussing it. So we have to keep kindling the Agni within, keep invoking the deity Agni if we have to really practice. That's why Agni is also considered as the psychic fire. So we have to really make our classrooms as a Yagna Vedi where this fire can be constantly lit. So it's the fire of aspiration, the upward drive to truth. I'm not going to read all these things, but that's what Agni represents. It's a psychological will force, the force of evolution, and the other Vedic deity that is very important, and again that was really beautifully brought up in one of the earlier presentations by Anuradha, the making of the Aryan character, which is the deity called Aryaman. He is one of the 4 noble kings that Sri Aurobindo speaks of. Aryaman is the force of tapasya, the force that really makes us move forward. And as Anuradha briefly described, the word itself, Arya, comes from Ari, or, which is a heroic traveler. Sri Aurobindo also uses another imagery. He's a farmer who plows the inner fields, right? So the inner fields, जो इतना हमारे अंदर मक है, उसमें flowers कैसे blossom करें? You need to have that Aryan character to do that. So he's a heroic traveler, insistent aspirant, warrior, represents qualities such as courage, endurance, all these things. So education should help us become Aryan. In one of his early writings, Sri Aurobindo says, this is the mission of India. To make the world Aryan. He says, to re-Aryanize the world. To re-Aryanize the world and to take out Malachhood. Malachhood is the impurity, right, that has gotten into it, and bring back the Aryan character. Now, what is so important to know is how in our history, the word Arya has been so distorted in the hands of the forces of darkness, and at the same time, Sri Aurobindo was sitting quietly in a room in Pondicherry, writing a journal week after week, or every 2 weeks, with the name Arya. To bring back light into the word, which is a Vedic word, which is a word that reminds us that King Ashwapati of Savitri was an Aryan. Sri Ram, we call him as an Arya Putra, right? All of these were Aryans, no matter what background they came from. Ahilyabai Holkar was an Aryan. Any example, all these people, they were fighting for truth. They were the noble, the Shresht, right? That's the word they use. So India's mission is to re-Aryanize the word. And this is where I want us to go back to the first point I said in his 1921 writing, when he said, if we can't figure out what is the future need, what the Indian temperament is all about, what the national temperament is all about, we cannot figure out what the future need of the humanities, how the two are connected. And one of the things I was telling, I think we were this morning at tea with Sharad Bhai and I, we were discussing how Alokji often gives a reference that India's work is, India has to do a PhD. Many other civilizations have to just stay at the kindergarten level. So for doing the PhD, the fight has to be, serious one. And the PhD thesis is to re-Aryanize the world, right? So it's not a small work. We have to start with ourselves. So we want to think of practices which can help us invoke Agni and bring Aryaman and Daksha and Sarama in our classrooms. So these are just some of the practices I want to figure, and I deliberately chose this picture because this was an activity we did with the teachers' workshop at a DAV school, an Arya Samaji school. They had not been exposed to just a simple question. Draw your hand, because that is unique to you, and then write 2-3 points what India means to you. We just take it for such a granted thing, what India means to us, right? ये यहाँ पे पैदा हुए हैं, यहीं पे ही सब कुछ है, so India is my motherland. But really what India means to us. Just by doing that exercise, so much was revealed. So, so regular use of, don't do it as an add-on thing, कि आज 6 महीने बाद याद आया करो. Make it a regular practice of our classroom. Regular use of reflective practices, silent introspection, build silences into the classroom period. Not when there is too much chaos, then bring silence back. Make it a regular practice. Self-understanding through academic subjects, flexible learning paths. This is very important. Like I said, we are often so caught up with labels. I taught at a university for 7 years or so more, where I was actually doing individualized integral education without knowing the word. Nobody knew we are following that. That was a program where each student was designing his or her own master's curriculum. One student, one professor. And they were also able to do this, they were doing this free progress method. And I had read a little bit about, but not so much, I had not gone so much deep into Mother's literature on integral education by that time. So these students were also going and knocking on the doors of people, whether they would like to be their course instructor for that one student. So individualized, completely free progress, guided by their own inner being, what they were seeking. So we may not be there yet at a college, university, school level, but we have to aspire to make learning as individualized, as flexible. At least, maybe we are better off by not having classes of 45. We have still made, progress, some progress there, but we have to make it even more. Discernment exercises through real life situations. This is another thing that I've often seen, which does not happen often. But residential institutions like this actually provide us good opportunity to do that. Because students are living together, naturally real life conflicts are coming up. So use those as a way for students to practice discernment. So don't say that ye tumhare ghar ka mamla hai, ye tumhari friendship ka mamla hai, don't bring it in classroom. This is another dichotomy we have created. This is classroom life, this is work life, and that is your other life. So this whole life-work balance actually has to be, all life is one life, mother says, right? So we have to bring in some of that things. Teachers as co-seekers, I cannot emphasize it enough. Teachers as travelers on the path, as co-travelers, and shift from competition to inner growth. So this is just a reminder again of who is this hero warrior. I'm not going to go over all this again, but I want to end with this. None of this sounds easy, right? Very difficult to do. And this question was asked of the mother. But this is so difficult to do. Mother says, we are not here to do easy things. So first of all, that thing has to be left out, कि हम सिर्फ repeat करेंगे जो पहले हो चुका है. She said it very clearly. I want to read the whole quote. We are not here to do only a little better what the others do. She's telling this in the context of ashram school, where there is so much spiritual environment, yet teachers were finding it difficult to do. So imagine anywhere else in the world. She reminds, we are not here to do only a little better what the others do. We are here to do what the others cannot do because they do not believe it can be done. So she's giving us a challenge. She's giving us an invitation. When Aurobindo was in prison, he wrote the poem Invitation. Right? He says, walk with me to those plains of freedom. Come with me. Are you willing to take this risk? He invited us. Mother is giving us another invitation as educators, as those interested in the work of education. She says, others do not believe it can be done, or they maybe don't even know it. We have this blessing. We know not only it must be done, but it can be done. And then actually, if you read this full quote, she says, anything less would not be worthy of Sri Aurobindo's blessing. So if we want his blessings, his grace, we have to aspire for the highest. Yes, it is challenging, but that's the work that has to be done, right? So that's what I thought, like, in terms of educational reform, we always think of something very concrete, but we have to really go beyond that. So these are some of the points I put. We are not here to tweak syllabi, but to reimagine the human being, right? We are not here to improve the examination systems. Most of the policy documents stop there, tweaking syllabi, rethinking examination systems. But we are here to ignite Agni, ignite aspiration. We are here not to produce those efficient workers, the sober critic, the careful scientist, the rationalist, whatever, the cautious politician. We are here to help reveal conscious, courageous, compassionate leaders. If you read Ahilyabai Holkar's, one of the taxation policies she brought in was totally on the basis of compassion. So these are the compassionate, courageous, conscious leaders. So we have to invoke these gods, Agni, Aryaman, and Daksha in us. And the Veda uses the phrase that let these gods be born in us. Let our classroom context be such where these gods are born within us as teachers, within us as students, as co-creators, and let our classrooms become the new Yagnavedi. So with that, I close, and I hope we have all been recharged to make education something that will make all of us a hero warriors. Thank you.